So I guess it's I know that the diagnosis had a massive impact in changing your life, but there probably were other things because actually, because I know you, I know that actually walking away from alcohol and addiction actually was the first step, I think. You didn't know that you had ADHD then. You did know why you were drinking. You knew that you were drinking because of the anxiety. What helped, because that sort of what helped you? What was the main motivating force behind stopping drinking? Because that is massive. I think you know more than me that actually for someone who's got an addiction to any kind of substance, actually walking away from that addiction or staying sober is actually really extremely hard thing to do. So what was the motivating force and what helped?
Yeah, well, I guess in some ways I'm quite blessed. I've seen many people stuck in the cycle of addiction who never break it. But a few things happened to me. I actually, oddly enough, it was actually my anxiety was one of the factors that helped me to stop drinking, because my anxiety got so bad after drinking that it felt like I was literally living in some sort of hellish. It felt like I'd been buried alive. I know it was a nightmare, and also I had a strong desire to change, and I'd always had a strong desire to change actually, but I think my anxiety got out of control. I managed to get a few people around me that were quite supportive, and that made a big difference. And then around that time, I also had a son, who was a huge influence in my decision to not only come off alcohol, but to also find answers as to why I'd done so poorly in life and why I was still struggling to function, even without alcohol. Without alcohol, I was still really dysfunctional and just not doing well emotionally.
So those were the motivating forces. And where did you get help to stop drinking?
I went to the bridge program, Salvation Army bridge program, twice. I went once and I had a relapse, only one relapse, but that was enough for me to reach out for help immediately. And I never drank after the second time. My son was born. My son brought a new reason for living, I guess, or added responsibility that I had to take seriously. So yeah, that I haven't drunken since then. Yeah.
And so the diagnosis of ADHD, how did you even get to that point where you thought maybe this is ADHD? Like how did that even come about?
Well, because I was on a quest to get answers to my problems and to get better, I had arranged to see a psychologist. And on the day I was meant to visit my psychologist, I was on the motorway, and I'd had a car accident, and I'd got into an argument with the person I had an accident with, and everything was just a mess. And I told I went to my first psychologist visit that afternoon, and told them about what had happened, and that I seem to always be having accidents and I'm reckless in that. And they said, "Oh, I think it sounds like you could have ADHD." So she made an appointment for me to see a psychiatrist. And so 6 weeks later, I went to see the psychiatrist, and he diagnosed me, amongst other things, but primarily with ADHD. And yeah.
Interestingly, I think that the timing of it was also around the time that Nathan was diagnosed with ADHD. I don't think he'd mind me saying that.
Yeah, I think it would have been a bit before, because I think Nathan was just a toddler at that. I think Nathan was diagnosed not long after that. There's definitely a family, something just genetic going on there. Yeah, because Nathan was very much like I was as a child. Well, looking at Nathan as a child was like looking at myself. Some of the unusual behavior.
And the really good sense of humor, but not everyone laughs at. Yeah, we do. We laugh at it. Okay, so what was it like? I guess once you got your diagnosis, what did it feel like to get a diagnosis?
Well, for me, it was great because it explained so many things, and it made me feel well, it made me feel that it made me realize that a lot of the stuff that I did and a lot of my failures were not really my fault. They were caused by the fact that I had I don't know how to put it, a condition, for want of a better word. Yeah. So
just the way your brain was wired.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just also just wondering, like, once you were diagnosed, what sort of happened next?
Well, the psychiatrist prescribed me ADHD medicine, which I refused to take for a long time because I had done some reading, and I decided that, or a lot of the literature I'd read said that ADHD medicine can cause anxiety or make anxiety worse. And the psychiatrist has said to me, look, I really believe that once you start taking this medicine, it'll actually make your anxiety better, because you'll start being able to organize and get things together. But I didn't. I wanted to believe him, but I was just it wasn't long before I'd been diagnosed that I'd had a serious sort of breakdown, and my anxiety was still particularly bad. So I was really afraid to take ADHD medicine, but I did eventually take it, and yeah, it changed my life. So it made life considerably easier.
So do you want to just talk about how it changed? What happened?
Yeah, well, being able to think clearly was a huge thing. It just felt like there was my mind became quiet, and I was able to think and to organize, and also I was able to, like the psychiatrist said, I was able to get stuff done. I was able to not procrastinate, even when I didn't. Even if it was a task that I didn't particularly like, I was still able to start and finish it, and I was able to act more responsibly, I guess, and fulfill my daily duties.
So so you found that you were able to complete some things and achieve some things and set some goals and complete them.
Yeah, which made me feel good about myself. It made me feel it was an instant self-esteem booster. I didn't feel useless, and I was able to making goals and achieving them, I think, is a huge part of a human's well-being, and it's something that I hadn't been able to do. So being able to do that, set a goal and achieve it, made me feel really good.
We've just got background noises from Louis, who is the another part of the family, who just would like to, I think he would like to be on camera and on the microphone as well. So if you hear sneezing or snuffling, that's what's going on. And barking or whatever, licking. Yeah, so I guess also in terms of your anxiety, was the doctor right?
Yeah, it did improve my anxiety. Just the basic, just those changes in my life, and my lifestyle improved my anxiety a lot. I mean, I still get anxious. I still have anxiety, but I don't have panic attacks anymore, which is great, because I always panic attacks to me were the worst thing.
I mean, you were diagnosed with a panic disorder at one stage, right? That's how much panic attacks were part of your life.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with a general anxiety disorder and a panic disorder, and just prior to seeing the psychiatrist, I had seen another psychiatrist through the mental health system who had tried to who had prescribed me antipsychotics to calm the anxiety because it was so severe, and I didn't actually take those, and it, although they can certainly help anxiety, they would have been the wrong thing for me because they lower dopamine, which I was already suffering from an issue with having lower dopamine. So, which wasn't this prescribing psychiatrist's fault. They just didn't have the history or the understanding of me to prescribe me what I really needed.
So, for parents who are listening who think that they are maybe seeing or suspecting some behaviour in their child or children, what advice would you give them?
The first advice I'd give is don't be too hard on them. That doesn't mean that you have to put up with bad behaviour or condone it, but it's really important that you don't make children feel bad about themselves or feel like they're inadequate or useless or whatever, or I mean, even calling them a naughty all the time, it can actually impact them eventually. I'm not saying don't use the word naughty. I'm just saying if there's more negative feedback than positive feedback, it's going to really negatively impact the child in the long run. So I would definitely suggest that you always use as much positive feedback as possible, and the least amount of negative feedback as possible, and seek help. Go and see a doctor, a specialist, and just keep going to see different doctors and specialists until you get answers that make sense.
I know for me with Nathan, and I have not got permission to talk much about Nathan, but I'll talk about my experience. I was really really afraid to admit that that there was an issue, and I didn't, I really had this real strong denial thing. I was really reluctant to go and get him assessed. And in hindsight, I actually prolonged, I think, his suffering and everyone else's as well, by doing that. I think it's a really common thing amongst parents, because you just want your child to be happy and you don't want them to suffer. And so it's sort of this real denial thing, I think it was in my case, which of course I regret now, but it is also quite a hard thing to know or recognize before school, because it's often in school that it really starts to come out.
I think well, ADHD is a spectrum, and certainly on the end of the spectrum that I was at, and Nathan too, it was severe and debilitating, and basically meant that I couldn't live successfully in this society. And some people say that ADHD is overdiagnosed, and I don't know whether that's true or not. But I definitely think that if there's any suspicion, if parents have any suspicion whatsoever, they should seek help, especially if the child is, if it's affecting the child's quality of life. And relationships are definitely a big thing, especially for children. They need good, strong relationships, firstly with their parents, but also with their peers as well.
Yeah, and it has a massive impact on their self-esteem and how the labels that they get and what they think about themselves, and that has a massive impact on the rest of their life. So, I mean, I think in terms of over-diagnosing or over-treating, I think that what I've noticed is that seems to be the criticism of the United States, whereas I don't think that is happening, or I'm not even saying that it is happening, but we tend to have the opposite in other countries. We have the opposite happening.
I get the impression that actually New Zealand is under-diagnosing ADHD, and I think that many of our statistics sort of seem to indicate that we're under-diagnosing ADHD. I read lots of statistics, and I think, you know, if ADHD was more recognised in New Zealand, these statistics might be a little bit lower, which would be great.
Is there any advice that you would, any different or specific advice that you would have for adults who think, oh my goodness, this maybe sounds a bit like me?
Yeah, get help. Go and speak to your GP. The problem with New Zealand is, in terms of seeing a specialist, is it can be extremely expensive and out of a lot of people's reaches, especially people with ADHD who often are not very financially well off and could struggle to pay the $600 fee to see a psychiatrist who they have to see in order to get diagnosed.
So will public health in New Zealand, obviously this podcast goes internationally, but we're just speaking about New Zealand health system. Can adults access the public health system to get diagnosed?
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I was lucky enough to go private, simply because I had funding through ACC. Most people wouldn't have that funding. And if it hadn't have been for that funding, I probably still wouldn't be diagnosed, because there's no way I would have forked out $600 to see a psychiatrist. But I would suggest getting in touch with not only your GP, but I think there's this ADHD society in New Zealand which would be able to offer advice. And there's also Facebook pages, a New Zealand ADHD Facebook page, which you can ask questions, and yeah, I just would find a way to see a doctor who can tell you whether you have ADHD or not.
Yeah, as a clinician, I've come across some clients who have suspected to have ADHD and I generally send them to private. And even then, the wait list is usually 4 to 6 months. I have always said to them, we can try the public mental health system, but there's no guarantee that will get in. And I think that's mainly because with mental health, they are prioritizing people in crisis. So in severe mental health issues, and in terms of, might be causing them suicidal ideation and things like that. So unless that's kind of going on, they may or may not see you. So that's the tricky part about it, I think. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would want to add to anyone who's
don't be afraid of the medicine. I mean, people think, with kids, I don't want to give my kids ADHD medicine because I'm basically giving them speed or I'm drugging them. But studies have shown that ADHD medicine, if given early enough, can actually correct the brain, the part of the brain that is affected by ADHD. So and as long as it's not abused, ADHD medicine, I think, is safe. It hasn't affected my health. In fact, if anything, it's improved my health. It's lowered my blood pressure, and I'm a healthier person since I started taking ADHD medicine. It's just that there seems to be some misconceptions around it, that you might as well just take P or whatever, or meth, and that's not really true. As long as the dose is, as long as you stick to the dose, and it's perfectly fine, and the life changing effects can be tremendous. And so don't be afraid. If you're an adult, or if your kid is diagnosed with ADHD, don't be afraid to medicate them.
Yep. If someone experiences too much, because it's a real balancing act, isn't it, with ADHD medication? Sometimes, I mean, with Nathan, I think we have pretty much tried every single medication in the book. Because and we won't go, I won't go into detail, but just because the medication can cause anxiety, and that was a really hard balance to, when a child with ADHD already has anxiety, it can make it worse. And obviously these are stimulants, and so it's this fine line. So we went, we did eventually find a couple, and that actually, and I think it was also the fact that he got older as well, that he was able to, he had the cognition to be able to understand his world a bit better, and understand what's happening to him better as well. But without going into more detail about Nathan, just to say, for those that can't seem to tolerate medication for ADHD, is what would you suggest to them? Like, why, what's the benefit of getting a diagnosis? What can they do about it?
Some people choose not to take medicine, which is fine. There are natural products, such as precursors to neurotransmitters involved in ADHD. They basically increase dopamine levels, which help. It does help. I don't believe that they're as good as pharmaceutical medicine at controlling ADHD symptoms, but they definitely can make a difference.
So, and we'll talk more about the natural supplement range that you've your book and your range of supplements. But what I'm hearing you saying is that if they just can't tolerate the anxiety side of the medication, pharmaceutical medication, or for any reason they just don't want to take that pharmaceutical medication, there are some alternatives that may not have as good as effect, but they do have an effect, and they also don't cause the anxiety.
Yeah, and they can also be used alongside pharmaceutical ADHD medicine, and basically enhancing it. As time goes by, ADHD medicine, people tend to build up a certain tolerance to it, and it's important, if you start ADHD medicine, that you go through cycles, trying to find the right ADHD medicine for you, because some of them you'll build up a tolerance to very quickly, and others you won't build up a tolerance to really at all, or maybe a minor tolerance. So yeah, you can also include supplements to help lower that tolerance and enhance the effects of the medicine, and they won't increase anxiety or create anxiety, really. So there are alternatives, yes. Yeah. I won't go on.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing your story and your wisdom and knowledge, because you're a big researcher, probably ever since ever since our child was diagnosed or suspected, you've researched and become a real expert in I think.
Well, I certainly have obtained a lot of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that, and we'll talk more about the book and about the supplements in a future episode. But thanks for your time today.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks.